From Ashes, Chapter 14, 4 years earlier. Davis County, Jesse said. I'll text you the number. I don't want to have anything really serious, I added, feeling twitchy about calling, going into buildings and all that. Yeah, she said. Honestly, you'll be lucky to have them call you in for anything out in Davis. There isn't a lot going on. When you do get called, it's usually to help the medics with a lift assist. Glamorous, I said. They always need help with the big ones. I could hear her smiling over the phone. None of us loved lift assists, especially when the patient was heavy enough to need 4 people, not 2. But by volunteering here and there, I'd be back with my people, helping out, even if it was just to help a heavy patient get on a cot and out to an ambulance. Sounds great, I said, and hung up the phone. It wasn't a lift assist. For my first call as a volunteer firefighter, I found myself on the scene of a raging fire. Dispatch had radioed it out as an illegal burn. Simple enough, usually a campfire or someone burning trash. But this was a drunken bonfire, which spread through a narrow field of dry corn stalks, catching the decrepit farmhouse beside it. Most of the people were out of the house, reveling as they'd been, but one of the men, scruffy beard, squinting eyes, he was sobbing like a baby, repeating, "You've got to get her out." "Who, sir?" I asked. "My grandma. She always takes the Tylenol PM and ain't nothing can wake her. She's dead asleep upstairs." Dead asleep? I thought it a poor choice of words, but called to the other firefighters who were gallantly spraying the sides of the house that I was going to go in. Why had I done it? Why had I basically volunteered to be the one running in? Plenty of logical reasons popped up. Old habits kicked in. The other volunteers were busy. As the newbie, I'd been left to take a report, and it had turned into more than that. There hadn't been a lot of time for deliberation. Plus, fires were loud, wild, roaring things, water sprayed at high velocity, the elements battling it out for dominance. It didn't leave room for chit chat. Besides, the scene looked safe. The walls still stable, the temperature reasonable. Only the western side of the house was actually on fire. I went in the east door, the screen swinging haphazardly on its hinges. On this side of the house, the smoke wasn't thick, though you could smell it, like every burned meal in the world had combined into the farmhouse foyer. I put my mask on, went up the narrow staircase to the floor where the man had said the bedrooms were. The fire hadn't even reached this high yet, but fires liked to creep up walls, sometimes race up walls, unless the other firefighters had stopped it. I opened the first door, then the second. I began to wonder if the drunken grandson knew what he was talking about, but at the third I found her, just as the man had said, asleep. Looking at her, she did look dead. I hoped she wasn't. I moved to the bed, shook her aggressively. She moaned, which I appreciated. "Ma'am," I said. Then, not knowing how to finish, I added, "It's time to wake up." She only turned in response. I shook her again, putting my arms under her back and lifting her up to a sitting position. She kept her eyes closed, like a stubborn child who didn't want to get up for school. I was trying not to drag her. Old bodies don't handle it particularly well, and she'd probably wind up bruised and maybe even with a broken bone or two. And I knew I couldn't lift her. Despite the Hollywood image of a firefighter gallantly carrying children and a gorgeous woman from the belly of a fire, this woman wasn't a size that could easily be hoisted into my arms or even over my shoulder. "Up we go," I said, using my legs to heave her into a standing position. Finally, she opened her eyes. "What are you doing in my house?" she asked, adding an impressive curse. "Well, ma'am," I said, glancing down at my coat, "your house is currently on fire." "Those boys," she said, cursing again, but stumbling forward now, gripping my forearms with long fingernails. "Careful now," I said, starting down the stairs. It should have gotten cooler with each step, but I swore they all felt every bit as hot. Sweat was pouring down my face, dripping into my eyes. The woman stumbled, and we both nearly rolled to the bottom, but I held tightly to the rail until she found her footing. We could hear the fire now, and she held a sleeve up to her nose. There was a lot more smoke than when I'd come up the stairs. Instinctively, we both crouched down, trying to get beneath the gray smoke to the door. Even the door was hot as we touched it. "I'ma kill him," she said. We moved to our hands and knees, a steady crawl. Outside, one of the walls cracked, a sound like thunder. She screamed and stopped moving. "It's okay," I said. "Keep moving. We're just about there." "My house," she said, her voice hoarse from smoke and emotion. I could feel the air from the door, the cool breeze leading us like a trail of breadcrumbs, and then the breeze slammed it closed. The old woman swore again. I stood, hunched over, and jogged forward, opening the door. This way, I said, reaching a hand out and helping her to stand up. Outside, the cold slapped our faces, and she took a sharp breath of sweet air. Standing in her yard, we looked around. Gray smoke billowed against the black night sky, swirling in patterns above our heads. Half of the house seemed to drip, black and charred, though the flames were receding now, losing their battle with the hoses. She lifted a hand to her eyes and started to cry. I wrapped an arm around her as a medic came over to check her vitals and help her into the ambulance. I haven't even worn a robe, she blubbered, on a cold night like this. Oh, we've seen much worse than nightgowns, the medic said, smiling. Least you thought to get dressed before bed. He helped her to the stretcher. I stood, just for a moment, taking it all in. The woman in the ambulance, the house of blackened charcoal, tiles and chunks of wood fallen and smoking on the ground. The grandson tripped over to the ambulance, crying, You saved her. He hugged me, and I smelled the alcohol and sweat and relief. I had saved an old woman, given her back to her family. A moment of joy, of ecstasy, really, one we rarely got. But it had been dangerous, controlled as much as things like fire could be controlled. In other words, not very controlled. I knew I should stop volunteering after this, hang up my hat, call it an amazing life experience those years I'd served. Served, past tense. But I also knew that I wouldn't. Even though I worried about getting hurt or even killed, even though I worried about leaving Gabby behind, I wandered back to the truck, took my mask off, feeling for the first time in my life like I was having an affair.